And welcome into the State of Purple podcast. It just would go to figure, Jack, that all morning, all week, my wireless mouse has been great, and right before we start the show, it dies. And so now I'm going rogue with my trackpad now, which is totally fine, but just threw me off a little bit. Almost didn't make the show in time, but we are here nonetheless. The State of Purple podcast. He's Jack Day. I'm AJ Monster, and we are presented by SodaStick and SodaStick.com. You can head over to SodaStick.com right now. Order your Minnesota sports inspired goods, maybe for the holiday, maybe for Black Friday, for Christmas, whatever you got coming up, and use that promo code KFAN, and it'll take 15% off your order at SodaStick.com. Thank you to SodaStick. Jack Day, 40-3. 40-3 was the score of that Minnesota Vikings game this last weekend. I don't think anybody saw that coming, no matter what you thought about the spread and the Cowboys being favored and all these things that we were talking about leading into this. Safe to say you didn't see 40-3 coming?
Yeah, I think that's pretty safe. And if you're out there saying that you did see 40-3 coming, I think you're lying, even if you're on the Dallas side of things.
Yeah, it was a full-fledged meltdown for the Minnesota Vikings. We can talk about this going in. Maybe it's a good thing that they turn the page and go to the Patriots right away. Short week, Thursday night, Thanksgiving night against the Patriots. Maybe it's not, because there's some injuries that they're dealing with. So that could go both ways. But, Jack, I was not able to take anything good from that game. Was there any silver lining that maybe I missed along the way that you had highlighted that we can kind of say, well, it wasn't all bad?
Well, I didn't. To be honest with you, I didn't watch the fourth quarter or much of it. I didn't get to watch the Nick Mullins experience, so I can't speak on that exactly.
I don't think the silver lining came there.
If there was any backup quarterback controversy that we wanted to start talking about yet, but yeah, there wasn't a lot of positivities. There was one thing that I did want to bring up to you, because I think the national perspective of this team, I don't know if changed is the right word, because nationally, it didn't really feel like nationally there was a lot of people fully bought in. Yeah, you saw them start sliding up the power rankings a little bit, but everyone was still kind of weary of the 2022 Minnesota Vikings. And I think that's fair to say now after seeing that game. But I do think one of the biggest storylines this week has been the point differential for an 8-2 team that it's
Right.
-2 now. The Vikings just lost by 37 points. It's going to be bad when the first 8 games of the season, 9 games of the season was all the storyline was the Vikings are winning 1-score games.
Right.
I'm no mathematician, but if a team scores or beats you by 37 points and you're winning 1-score games, the odds are you're going to have a bad point differential. So I think that's kind of a storyline that's been blown out of proportion a little bit. I still think the Vikings are a good football team. Like we've said this entire season, we don't know if the Vikings are a Super Bowl caliber contending football team, but they're a good football team that can win some games. And I think we're going to continue to see that throughout the duration of the rest of this season.
Right, and maybe this is our own fault, right? We as Minnesotans, we do this every year with the Gophers, with the Timberwolves, with the Vikings and the Twins and the Wild and everybody. We get our hopes up, and they start to see some good things, and we immediately go from being a good football team to Super Bowl. We're going to Super Bowl. Like this is what we do here. There is the idea that maybe the Vikings are a paper tiger, and maybe those wins that they were eating out were the signs of a good, not great football team. I think we all agree with that part of it. What I think that we can take from the point differential situation. Clearly, the math adds up if you know the story behind that. But they are the first team in NFL history to go 8-2 and have a negative point differential. So there's something to be said there. It just doesn't happen. And maybe what it tells us is that this team is just that. They're a good football team. They've played some bad teams. They've had some serendipitous luck, if you will, on their side that has helped them. They can beat good teams. They can play down to the level of competition. But in the 2 games that they've lost, they've been blown out. I mean, it's been blowouts against, some good teams. Philadelphia is a good team. Dallas is a good team. But then they beat another good team in Buffalo. They've beaten good teams along the way as well. That Washington win doesn't look as terrible as maybe it did, now that they're getting hot. There are those scenarios. It might just tell us that the league is a little more open than we had thought. The NFC is open. The AFC is open. I think outside of Kansas City, I don't know that there's a team I'm scared of, right? I mean, am I missing anybody? San Francisco looks pretty good, but they played pretty bad sometimes too. Dallas, Philly, Baltimore's garbage now. I mean, am I missing anything there?
I don't think so. I don't think there's outside of the teams that you mentioned. I don't think there's many teams that are far and above and beyond better than the Vikings, if not better at all. So I do want to say a couple things about this game, and maybe this is the portion of the show where we kind of fast forward and skip through the
Right.
hopeful, positive remarks when we get to some of the negatives. But
This is a mature content warning right here. If you want
the
to put yourself through this, be warned.
Yes, but the Vikings have two losses, and I was just kind of going through both of them a little bit in my mind. Obviously, the Philly game it feels like years ago already, but
Right.
how weird is it that the two games that the Vikings lose, they lose in what feels like blowout fashion? The Dallas one was more so blowout fashion, but in the first half, it still felt like a football game. It felt like, hey, maybe the Vikings could come back in this one like they have before,
Well,
but it just
use that language loosely, because let's say what is each quarter's 15 minutes. So in the first 28 minutes, it might have felt like that. The last 2 minutes, the
true.
tide shifted pretty dramatically from being we're in this game to okay, now we've got a problem. And then in game time, another couple minutes later, Dallas scores again and it's over at that point.
Yeah, and it just felt like I don't know. The thing that I wanted to bring up, the Philly game, the pivotal point in that game, and you look back, every single Vikings fan that watched that game remembers this. Irv Smith Jr. dropping a probable touchdown pass. This game against Dallas, same position, the new prize toy that is supposed to be, and I'm still very excited about the TJ Hawkinson trade. Don't get me wrong, but he dropped a touchdown that I think most of us would have assumed he'd catch that pass. It hit him right in the hands and he was in the end zone. I know it was kind of a toe tap situation, but I just thought that was weird when I was replaying both of the games in my mind, that both of those games, although they were blowouts, they felt like the Vikings could potentially crawl their way back into those games with the tight end position kind of was a pivotal turning point in both of those games. And I wanted to say too, yes, the Vikings, it felt like they could come back in this game because they've been labeled the cardiac kids. They've been labeled, this is what they've been doing all season. They're coming back. Quite frankly, in this one, it didn't feel like that. And it felt like the cardiac kids were completely out of gas, if I'm being honest with you. It didn't feel like they had that I don't even know the word I'm looking for, but that oomph that they had in games past where they were willing to claw their way back into games. It didn't feel like they had that, and it felt like from the get-go that Dallas had the Vikings number.
It was weird too, Jack. I mean, these afternoon games are a little different, right? The 325 games. It felt from the get-go that the crowd, not that they weren't into it, but the energy was certainly not there. It's not a night game. You don't have the darkness and the cool lights to get the pregame show going and the feature of being a lone wolf on the night games. But it wasn't a noon game either, and it just felt sleepy right away. I talked to Rosie, who was sitting next to me. I said, "Hey, everything sounds quieter. Even the music that they were pumping in to kind of as the players were running onto the field sounded quieter for some reason." And I don't know if that part of it was factual, but certainly the crowd was not as into it leading up to the game and early in the game. And then very quickly, when Cowboys start taking the lead, the strip sack on that first play, it completely turns the tide, and it just felt like you turned it off in the fourth quarter. It felt like people there wanted to turn it off in the fourth quarter, but they stuck around for a bit because you mentioned the things that this team has done. But it quickly became out of reach, and I think that felt the way that it felt different. All right, we've been down double digits twice to the Lions in that one game. You have that opportunity there to fight your way back, and this team has done that. But at the same time, this one just felt different. It felt like the Vikings, clearly they had prepared, but maybe they prepared for the wrong stuff, or they weren't prepared for what the Cowboys brought, whether it be the 5 defensive linemen, Micah Parsons. Clearly the injuries stacked up too, both on offense and defense. We need Dalvin Tomlinson back really bad. We need Christian Darrisaw healthy really badly. We won't have Darrisaw for Thursday. Tomlinson, I think, practiced yesterday, so that's a good sign. But all these things that we had kind of been escaping, everybody laying an egg at the same time. Usually it's been, one side or the other. Yesterday or Sunday, it was everybody. The injuries stacking up. These are the things that we didn't have early in the season that now we do. We have to find a way for this team. They have to find a way to get over that, to move on, and to continue. And it might just happen to be quickly turning the page to a potentially tough but not great New England Patriots team.
Yeah, I think another thing, just kind of going one off of that, I think we were spoiled throughout the beginning of the season talking about injuries with good luck in terms of players being healthy. We're starting to see the lack of experience show in the secondary as well. I think I've been really ecstatic seeing the play of both Patrick Peterson and Harrison Smith and taking that veteran leadership and establishing themselves even further in that defense. But Andrew Booth, it was tough to watch right away. And he was a player that I was really, really excited about when they drafted him. But I think if you're looking at the small sample size, again, extremely small sample size, I don't think it's fair for Vikings fans to be like, Andrew Booth doesn't belong in this league. That's not the case. He's a good player, and I think he's going to get there. He's just not ready yet. I think it's a Caleb Evans job moving forward. If he comes back, he was another one that was limited in practice yesterday, coming off of that concussion in Buffalo. But the difference that we've seen in a Caleb Evans to Andrew Booth is night and day. And again, super small sample size, but we've seen a Caleb Evans, the 4th-round rookie, come in and actually make some plays that you're supposed to make. And Andrew Booth, I think he was kind of thrown into the fire. I don't think the team was willingly wanting to put him out there, especially against the Dallas team that has superstars all over the field. But Delvin Tomlinson is a huge one as well. And I think you saw that with Tony Pollard virtually doing whatever he wanted to do against that Vikings defense. It didn't seem like Ed Donatel, like you said, had the correct game plan to properly attack Dallas's offense, and then flipping the script and going to the other side of the ball. I know Christian Darrisaw was out, but I think he played 18 or 20 snaps, something like that. I want to say he still gave up 2 sacks potentially.
It was 2 really quick, right?
Yeah. Right away. And so I don't know. Again, Christian Darrisaw has been one of the biggest bright spots on this team, but I don't know how much of a difference he makes having him in that game, because he was getting blown up too. I'm concerned about going up against the Patriots. They have the #1 sack leader with 13 total sacks on the year, which we'll get to in a little bit. But Blake Brando did not fill in admirably like we thought he did against Buffalo. He got blown back a couple times. And if you're blaming Kirk Cousins for this loss, this is kind of the last talking point that I wanted to have. I've seen some stuff on Twitter. I don't think that's fair. Kirk Cousins, we've talked about this all along. If he doesn't have protection, he's not going to thrive. He was pressured on over 60% of his dropbacks and sacked 7 times. If you tell me that going into any single game, it doesn't matter who the Vikings are playing. If you tell me that Kirk gets sacked 5+ times and is pressured on even 50% of his dropbacks, I'm going to say the Vikings lose that game, because you're not going to be able to do. And another thing in that situation, it didn't really feel like the run game was established, or they didn't have time to establish the run game because they were playing from behind so frequently during the back half of that game. But the rollouts and the play action stuff, it just seemed like it was straight dropbacks, and they weren't utilizing. I know Kirk Cousins isn't Lamar Jackson out there, but the guy can move a little bit. Don't do these 7-step. When you have a guy like Michael Parsons chasing after you, don't let him do these 7-step dropbacks where he's getting hit before he can even plant his foot in the 7th step. So I think those are my main takeaways from that game. Like I said, there weren't many positive things to talk about, but hopefully that changes here moving forward in the upcoming weeks for us.
Yeah, and while it wasn't Kirk's fault that we lost the game, clearly he played a part in it, like everybody else did. And I think that we see the difference between maybe the limitations that Kirk brings to the table when we play against a quarterback like Dak Prescott. We've seen it with other quarterbacks too, and Kirk struggles with that internal clock. That was part of it. At least 2 of those sacks probably could have been avoided. There shouldn't be that much pressure on him. But knowing that there is that much pressure because you've been pressured all day and sacked 7 times, you need to understand, hey, I might have to get the ball out a little quicker, or I might have to be a little more aware of my surroundings and throw this ball away. The strip sack was certainly one of those at the beginning of the game. There was another one that was for sure, I would, put it on Kirk in the sense that he didn't let the defensive lineman past him. He didn't dictate whether the defensive backs were locked up on the receivers, but he knew the situation and could have gotten rid of the ball to at least save the scenario a little bit. And then the other thing that you noticed specifically this week with Dak, that Kirk just doesn't have this. Kirk needs things to be planned out, proper, in order for him to succeed. And that's great. That's okay. That's just one of his attributes that the coaches need to work on, the game plan, the players need to work on their role and their responsibilities. But when you see Dak Prescott hurry to the line of scrimmage, right, it prevents substitution for the Vikings, and then he sits and he assesses. He sees what's going on, and he calls out to the line. He calls out to the team, and he audibles, or he calls a hot route or whatever. I don't know exactly what he's doing because I'm not privy to their codes. But at the same time, you can tell he's directing traffic. He's doing things, telling things, changing things based on what he sees in the defense. That happened multiple times, most notably on that Tony Pollard 69-yard touchdown. Dak identified that Jordan Hicks was lined up on the running back. You've got a running back who's good at pass catching up against a linebacker who's not great at pass coverage. He's a great tackler. He leads our team in tackling, but he's not great in coverage. And Prescott highlighted that. He highlighted it. He called the number. He let everybody know this is where I was going and threw it right over the top the way that he had planned. I don't know that Kirk has that in him. And at this point, I don't know that it's something he can learn. I think it's just one of his limitations. Everybody has their limitations. That's one of his.
Yeah. And again, I just want to go back to what you said too. Again, there's blame to go around with Kirk Cousins in this game. Don't get me wrong with that. But I don't know if there's many positions that you can look at from that game and say they weren't a reason for that loss. It was an ugly performance that I think you and I are both excited to put in the rearview mirror. I think this team is ecstatic to put this in the rearview mirror. I know you wrote an article about this, talking about the difference of opinions on whether or not, and this can be kind of the transition to the Patriots talk maybe, but whether or not it's a good thing that this is a quick week where they have 3 to 4 days to prepare for another good but not a great football team that's coming to Minnesota. And at the end of the day, I'm just hopeful that the Vikings can find a way to win this one, so the homes in the entire state of Minnesota can at least have a nice nightcap to a hopefully fun Thanksgiving.
Right. Before we fully turn the page there, I do want to say the one thing that I'm interested to see, maybe more than anything, is how the coaching staff bounces back from that loss. Players, we've seen it before. Players go out there and do their thing. We haven't seen it from Kevin O'Connell yet. There was a Philly game, but we didn't know exactly what this team had and what this team was at that point. And Philly kind of blitzed us and did some things that maybe they were prepared for. Now we know who we are a little bit, right? Still haven't played that perfect game. Not sure that they're going to, but they're better than they were on Sunday. And how do they bounce back from that? How do they get that? How do they change what they put on tape as far as the tendencies and play calls and some of the missteps as far as coverages and things that they were choosing as far as coaches and coordinators? I'm very interested to see how Kevin O'Connell, Donatel, and the rest of that coaching staff bounces back again against maybe one of the most intimidating coaches that the NFL has ever seen, right? When you line up and look across the line and you see Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots on the other side, you know that you are going to have a cerebral match, and coming off of a 40-3 blowout is not exactly the way you want to enter that matchup. So yeah, we can go on to that matchup now, Jack. You mentioned the thought process of quickly turning that page and forgetting the blowout and moving on to the next game. Both Adam Thielen and Patrick Peterson were on KFAN this week talking about, in their perspective, it is important and essential and probably beneficial for them to get that bad taste out of their mouth as quick as they can and move on, turn the page. You have to. 3 days, you don't even have time to really reflect on that loss. And it was probably good the way that it happened, because it was just, everything was bad, right? You didn't have to figure out what went wrong because everything went wrong. But then there's that other side. Ben Lieber brought this up on the Power Trip yesterday about this is mid-season. We're finally starting to get hit by injuries. Some players might be able to use those extra 2 or 3 days to get healthy and get back. I don't know that it would matter for Darisaw. Might matter for Dalvin Tomlinson, might matter for Caleb Evans, some of those guys. So differing perspectives there. But generally speaking, Jack, I think the fan base is ready to hopefully move on to another win. But I think very, very scared what happens if they lose another one. Two games in 1 week. Where are we then at 8-3? Still in good position record-wise, but the vibe has completely shifted from Kirk O'Chains to Vikings down the drains, whatever you want to say. I mean, it could be bad.
Yeah, I think, and you and I are both fully aware of this, but I think this fan base is a little bit, they're quick to hit the panic button. I think I'll say that nicely. And I think after a game where they lose 40-3, I think it's warranted a little bit. But again, I'll go back and say this is an 8-2 football team that has had their moments where they've shined and they've looked like they belong in the Super Bowl conversation. Again, I'm going to say conversation. I'm not going to say Super Bowl winning team, but I wanted to say this because I think this is kind of, it's humorous to me because I think, yeah, I don't want to take anything away from New England when I say this because they're 6-4. They have a very good defense, but this is the most beatable Patriots team that I have gotten to witness in my lifetime because it's been Tom Brady throughout the entire course of
Right.
my lifetime. And it is still Bill Belichick, probably the best NFL coach of all time. But I wanted to ask you this because I do think there's an intimidation factor with Bill Belichick just because it's who he is. He's won 6 Super Bowls. I think most first-year head coaches going up against Bill Belichick would be a little bit, I don't know if the timid is the right word that I'm looking for, but I could see where that would kind of come to fruition where and first-year head coach is like standing across the sideline. It's like, that's Bill Belichick. I'm coaching against the best to ever do it. Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots drafted Kevin O'Connell. So there's a relationship there between the two. Again, I don't know how much a backup quarterback has a relationship with that head coach in New England, but there has to be at least some relationship there. So I'm excited to see that. There's got to be at least some sort of established relationship between the two. And I think that that'll create some fun storylines on Thursday night.
Yeah, I wonder. Clearly, I don't have any research on this, and maybe I'll check it out after this. But I wonder what Belichick's record is against new coaching staffs.
I would imagine it's good. I would
But
imagine.
the only question I would have is you don't exactly know what you're getting, right? I mean, if you go up against a coach that you've seen before or you've seen in the league for multiple years, you know what they're bringing to the table. We've talked about it all season long with O'Connell and the Vikings. We don't know what this team is exactly because they're still new. They're still getting used to it. They're still opening up that playbook and figuring out what they can do. Now, clearly, there's some tape out there. I mean, there's some opportunities and tendencies that they can figure out. And you always have that thing in the mindset with Bill Belichick that he knows something that you don't, or he's able to like peer through you and see into your soul and figure out something that, you know, your deepest, darkest secret to take advantage of. But in baseball, when they pull up a rookie pitcher and they start him because they have to do a spot start or whatever, sometimes you see that rookie pitcher have success because there's no tape on them. There's no opportunity to kind of know what they do. I wonder if there is maybe, I'm not saying that rookie coaches have a winning record against Bill Belichick, but if it's maybe a little different just because there is that difference and we don't know what this team is, the team might not know what this team is, and how can the opponent know?
Yeah, I just did some quick math for you. Not going back to when Bill Belichick started his coaching, because that would take me a lot longer to do than a couple minutes. But from what I can tell, I could be wrong on this. I could be missing someone, but it looks like they're 0-2 this year against first-year head coaches. They lost to Miami, and they also lost to Chicago, which, again, if you're losing to
Maybe there's
Chicago, I
something
think
there.
you're a beatable team. So again,
Right.
small sample size, but yeah, maybe the Vikings are, well, for sure. We already know this. We do know that this is going to be a lot different Vikings team than what Bill Belichick was used to coaching against with Mike Zimmer. It's complete different style. They're supposed to be more of an offensive identity, and I think this is going to be. I think this is going to be another low-scoring game. I'm not saying it's going to be a walk-off punt return 10-3 game like the Patriots just had against the Jets on Sunday, but I think this, in theory, should be a lower-scoring game. The Patriots have their strong suit. Their identity is still on the defensive side of the ball. Like I said, Matthew Judon leads the NFL and with 13 total sacks. That's, I think, two or three more than Micah Parsons. Yeah, that should probably worry you a little bit if you're a Vikings fan hearing that, because we just had to watch Micah Parsons completely annihilate an offensive line that I think the majority of Minnesota was kind of starting to feel better about. I won't say great, or I won't even say good, but that term average is something that we use a lot when talking about the offensive line, because we've always kind of called and said, hey, all they need is an average offensive line. And I don't think what we saw on Sunday afternoon was average. I think that was at least slightly below average, especially in that game, because you don't see 60% excuse me, I didn't even know where I was going with that, but 60% getting to Kirk Cousins on 60% of his dropbacks. But like I said, I think this is going to be one of those games where it's not going to be very entertaining. Hopefully that the US Bank Stadium is full with a bunch of people that have a good base of food in them with a nice turkey dinner before the game. But I think it's going to be another boring one, and I'm hopeful that doesn't mean it's going to be a snooze fest for the fans as well.
I'd say that it can't be a boring one. I think that the Vikings need to make a statement. And if they are going to have aspirations to go far and do something this season, you need to not only get your fans back in your good graces and get a win, but at the same time, you need to prove something to yourselves that you are not just a fluke, that those wins by one score or the comebacks, whatever, were because you're a good team and not because you were fluky and got lucky or got the right call or the right opportunity for an interception. Because you could very easily say that that's what it was, that's what it is. But if you go out and you bounce back and you dominate, whatever that looks like, right? Whether you're playing great defense and you don't allow many points, or you go out and score a lot of points and blow them out of the water, I think easier said than done, right? And any Vikings fan wants that, but it might be essential. It might be essential to get everybody back onto that bandwagon and really put some faith into this team. It isn't the team. You're right. It is not the kind of team that you are able to do that easily against. A Bill Belichick team is disciplined, and they're not going to find themselves in terrible spots very often, but it does happen, and it is possible. So I think that is the goal. I think that should be a focal point for this team. That might seem like a silly thing to say because, of course, you want to blow every team out of the water. But I think this team in particular might need it. Jack, we do have a holiday week. We have a shortened week at work. We have family stuff coming up, all these things. So this will probably be our last podcast before that game. You said it's going to be low scoring. Put some numbers to it. What do you think? Where are you feeling this will end up? Final score and who wins Thursday night? Again, national audience. Not our best window of opportunity.
That's true, and that worries me a little bit. But I do think I have a good feeling going into this game. I will say that I didn't have that feeling going into the Dallas game for some reason. It just felt similar to, I don't want to put it in that category, but it felt very similar to that Minneapolis Miracle game. Not the celebrating necessarily and going crazy because it was a playoff game, but the Vikings were coming off of a win against a team that was labeled as one of the top Super Bowl contenders, and it felt like
they were the favorite. Yeah,
it felt like the Vikings really took that to heart and they really soaked that up, and they celebrated that win extremely hard. And I think the hangover, it was real against Dallas. I think they just came out completely flat. I don't think that team is going to show up this Sunday or on Thursday. I almost said Sunday. I don't think it's going to be like that. I think this is going to be a much more polished Vikings team. And I think we're going to see some of the similarities that we've seen throughout the normal games of the season. I'll count that Cowboys game as an outlier, but I think you're going to see a very good scripted first drive for the offense where they're going to kind of hang in the game. And I think this is a game where the Vikings can win by more than one score. And I will say that I think the Vikings put up, right. I'm going to say this is going to be a 23-14 win for the Vikings. I think the Patriots hang around. I think it's a close game. And I think the Vikings pull away in the fourth quarter. Maybe that's with an extra field goal to get them above that one score. But I think the Vikings win by more than a one score game. And I think that should, at the very least, at least have their fans feeling decent on a good Thanksgiving night with the team sitting at 9-2.
We will certainly see. I mean, it's going to be a tough one. What you said, 23-14. Okay. I can definitely hear that. I'm hoping that the Vikings score at least 27. Put that. Well, I'm going to leave it at that. I don't think they'll give up 27 to the Patriots. I don't think the Patriots can score 27. So that might be the better way to put it.
Hopefully they can tackle Ramondre Stevenson. I will say that. Hopefully they have someone that can stop him up the middle in this one. But
cover your punts, because that game was 3-3 until that punt return and the walk-off. Let's not let that happen for this team. But Cool, Jack. All right, man. If you want to find old episodes of the State of Purple podcast, you can find them on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And you can subscribe so that future episodes will get delivered straight to your device, and you'll be alerted when they arrive. And as always, as you're planning your holiday shopping, Black Friday coming up, Cyber Monday coming up, Christmas holiday, Hanukkah, whatever you celebrate with you and yours, check out SodaStick and sodastick.com. Take 15% off your order with the promo code KFAN. Get your Minnesota sports inspired goods for that Minnesota sports fan in your life. sodastick.com, promo code KFAN. Now, my mouse is dead, so I'm going to clunk through this. But, Jack, we will sign off. Go Vikings. Thursday night, big one. Hopefully we get a win and move on to what would be, 9-2 on the season. That's not bad at all, right? That's good. I like
9-2. Yeah, we can live with 9-2. I think, again, if the Vikings score 27 against this defense, I think Vikings fans are going to be feeling, I don't want to say great, but they'll be feeling at least a little bit better about this team.
Well, let's go do it. All right, Skull Vikings. We'll see you later next time on the State of Purple podcast. Those are all the wrong ones. Where did my clothes go? I deleted it. Here it is. All right, see you later.